Welcome back to Destin reads a 40-page document and points out when Sony is being hypocritical. This is part 3 of me reading through the, I believe it's 20 pages long, 40 different points, and we're about halfway through. I'm going to try and wrap it up in this video, but there was a lot to go through. So here's what Sony had said to the CMA, and some things were very interesting, including they sort of alluded to when the PlayStation 6 would launch. Let's dive into this right now. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to know when my content goes live, especially when I'm doing a 3-part series about a massive letter, and we still have Microsoft's response to go over. Anyway, continuing on, a period until 2027 or some other possibly shorter time that Microsoft unilaterally determines makes sense to Microsoft is badly inadequate. Now, they're talking about the period of time when Call of Duty would be made available on PlayStation. Since they've written this, Microsoft and Xbox have actually extended a 10-year deal to PlayStation, and PlayStation still has not accepted. Now, no lawyer would ever write a contract that basically says forever. They can't really do that, so don't expect that in the near future. This is an incredibly generous deal. Anybody in the legal side of things would tell you. So the fact that Sony is thumbing their nose up at it is strange, but I think it's a strategy. I don't think Sony actually is worried about this deal. I think they are trying to make it look as bad as it possibly can for them so that they get it blocked. Let's continue on. By the time SIE launched, what did I put here? I had a note on this one. I can't. Why is it being weird? Well, it's being weird. Oh yeah, Sony just revealed the PS6 launch window. So here's what I talked about in the intro. By the time SIE launched the next generation of its PlayStation console, which is likely to occur around blank, it would have lost access to Call of Duty and other Activision titles, making it extremely vulnerable to consumer switching and subsequent degradation of its competitiveness. So they low-key just told us that the PlayStation 6 would launch around 2027 or sometime shortly after 2027. So sounds like we got about, what is it, 2022, 23, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got about 5 more years with the PlayStation 5 until we start seeing advertising. 4 more years probably until we see advertising. And then the PlayStation 6 would likely launch in 2028. No note there, but Sony did mess up because shortly after they must have written this, they had their offer for 10 years, and now they've revealed when the PlayStation 6 would launch. More generally, Microsoft's past conduct shows that its public utterances should be treated with extreme skepticism. The decision identifies 5 separate transactions: ZeniMax, Obsidian, In Exile, Ninja Theory, Compulsion, where Microsoft acquired game studios and then made their upcoming games exclusive to Xbox. I mean, they never promised that Bethesda games would remain on PlayStation 5. As a matter of fact, they quoted specifically what Phil Spencer said. This is about delivering great exclusive games for Xbox customers that ship on platforms where Game Pass exists. That's our goal. That's why we're doing this. That's the root of this partnership that we're building. Now, he's talking about Bethesda there, but everything Microsoft has said about the Call of Duty deal is much more similar to how they handled Minecraft. And Minecraft is a hugely profitable IP for them. Sony actually mentions this and they're like, well, that was a really old transaction. We shouldn't even pay attention to it because it worked out great for everybody. In response to the CMA's analysis of its past conduct, Microsoft points to a single example from almost a decade ago of an acquired game that it did not make exclusive: Minecraft. But Minecraft is a completely different proposition. Like how they just brush it off. That's what I put in my notes. So I was reading it and laughing because I'm like, they're just like, but Minecraft's different. That's totally different than Call of Duty, which is multi-platform, and they plan to remain multi-platform and make money off of. It's very different. So I found that very funny. And separately, they talk about how Bethesda went exclusive. Sure, Elder Scrolls and the core Fallout games went exclusive, but Fallout 76 remained multi-platform. Elder Scrolls Online remained multi-platform. The Skyrim Special Edition or whatever is currently on the PlayStation 5 for purchase. So I think it's a very bad example that they're utilizing when there are examples of those games being available still. on the PlayStation hardware. Continuing on, for completeness, the decision reached its finding on Microsoft's incentives without placing significant weight on the economic incentives analysis developed by Cornerstone Research and RBB Economics. I'm going to skip ahead. If anything, this is conservative because it finds a significantly lower critical switch rate. So it doesn't really support their point at all. This whole paragraph, they're trying to say like, oh, a bunch of people are going to switch over, but then they say it's conservative. So at the end of the day, I don't really feel like whatever point they're trying to make, because there's no data provided, I believe it's all redacted in the footnotes, actually supports their findings. So it's kind of a moot point that they would even address this. The point is, even if Sony were to lose Call of Duty entirely, they're still going to be just fine. In reality, competition and consumers would be harmed in the short term and long term. My question is how? Microsoft's third argument on how TOH1 is like, Sony is not vulnerable to a hypothetical foreclosure strategy because Sony has been the largest console platform for over 20 years. The circumstance that Microsoft is currently somewhat behind in SIE console sales does not mean that the transaction cannot harm competition and consumers. It does not harm competition. Sony does not want to compete. There's a big difference between harming competition and making you get off your butts and actually come up with some compelling stuff that get more users in your wheelhouse. You can improve PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium. Premium is needs a lot of work, by the way. I've said it since the beginning. Extra is where it's at, and a lot of people are agreeing with me that Premium just ain't it. So you laid out this thing and then what? You just abandon it? Stop making excuses for your own shortcomings. I don't like that they're like, oh, this is going to harm competition. We're just not even going to compete if Call of Duty goes to Xbox. They're hamming it up, but everybody sees right through it, and it is not a good look for Sony, in my opinion. Continuing on, specifically, PlayStation users who prefer playing Call of Duty on PlayStation would be harmed by being denied the opportunity to play Call of Duty on their device of choice. They wouldn't be harmed. Call of Duty is going to remain on PlayStation in perpetuity, and Microsoft would agree to at least the next 10 years or whatever, the regulators are going to ask for. So nobody's actually going to be harmed. They would face two options, either to not play Call of Duty or to incur a cost of £450 to buy an equivalent Xbox console and play Call of Duty on a less preferred device at a similar quality to the level they currently enjoy. Look, I have to play God of War Ragnarok. I have to play Spider-Man. I have to play Returnal. I have to play all these great games that Sony creators have created on my less preferred device. If I could use the Xbox controller and play those same games, yes, I would prefer that. But at the end of the day, it's a very minor inconvenience to play those games. And your argument is invalid immediately because Call of Duty still will be available on PlayStation. It's just ridiculous that they're even going with this angle. In the former case, consumers would self-evidently lose the opportunity to play one of their favorite games, like Final Fantasy, because I lost my opportunity to play Final Fantasy on Xbox because you decided to pay to have it exclusively on PlayStation. You're just mad because Microsoft has more money and they can actually buy Activision and Call of Duty and these other properties, and you can't do anything about it. And that means you are going to be on a much more even playing field with Microsoft, and you hate it. You are doing everything you possibly can, and I'm speaking about Sony, of course, to get this deal squashed. And, at the end of the day, I'll give them this. It's smart business. But when this does go through, assuming it goes through, they're going to have to figure something else out to keep their customers on their platform if they can switch over to Xbox and get it at a better value. What value propositions will you offer your customers? That's what I want to know. In the latter case, in addition to paying for a new console that they would not otherwise have bought, those PlayStation users who sold their consoles in the process of switching would lose access to their current PlayStation content library. Not really. They could still access most of the games on their PlayStation 4, and the odds of them selling their console, that's a personal choice. That's not something that Sony gets to determine somebody would or would not do. I find that argument really weak. I find most of their arguments very weak. I think they called out Xbox appropriately when Xbox said Call of Duty is not valuable. Of course it's valuable. You're spending $69 billion to buy the company to get ownership of that property at the end of the day. But nobody's talking about World of Warcraft. Nobody's talking about Overwatch, really. They mention in here, but like Sony's really missing the ball about the other properties. They're so focused on Call of Duty that they could have made a more compelling case against the merger that they just totally missed, in my opinion. Second, Microsoft's foreclosure strategy would prevent SIE from competing for a large portion of console gamers, reducing incentives to invest in innovation. So here they are again, just saying, well, if they can buy Call of Duty, we're just going to pack it up and go home. We're not going to invest in innovation. We're not going to innovate. It's reduced our incentive to do so. Cry some more. Like, that's your problem. I think that's absolutely pathetic, honestly. You're not going to invest in innovation if your competitor buys something. Come on. PlayStation and Xbox's incentives to invest in innovation and quality improvements depend on the number of customers that competition can attract. Microsoft's foreclosure strategy may lock in many consumers to Xbox, including existing Xbox users who play Call of Duty and those switching from PlayStation due to Call of Duty. This whole argument is stupid. It's like saying that I shouldn't make YouTube videos because Phil DeFranco is making YouTube videos. It's saying the Rainbow Six team shouldn't make Rainbow Six because Call of Duty exists. Grow up. I think it's a pathetic argument if I'm being as kind as I possibly can be. Those locked-in users would become less likely to switch in response to any pro-competitive actions on SIE's part. This would effectively prevent SIE from competing for the business of a large portion of console gamers. Great. Maybe you'll stop playing to make not Call of Duty, to make Final Fantasy exclusive. You're expressing anger and frustration because Xbox is going to implement the same strategies that you have been implementing your whole life cycle. You buy companies, you make those games exclusive. Sure, you foster them and help them grow. And that's the biggest argument that people have had against Xbox, that they don't feel like Xbox has figured out their release strategy, and they haven't. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2023 and beyond. But the fact that you lay out exactly what you have done and then say, we're worried Xbox is going to do that, that's the part that's a little bit funny. Then, with its closest competitor significantly weakened and having captured a substantial portion of console users, Microsoft would have the ability to increase prices or otherwise reduce the quality of its offerings. Oh man, who has increased their prices lately? Gosh, that's such a familiar talking point. Oh, was it you? PS5 price to increase in select markets due to global economic environment, including high inflation rates. And then look at all these price increases. And they say, well, that's different. No, it's not. You've reduced your internal component price, and then you increase the price of your product. So you want to talk about a bunch of BS? Look in your own wheelhouse. That's exactly what you have done. Third, gaming platforms become more attractive to gamers the more other gamers are on them. Accordingly, the loss of a substantial number of Call of Duty players would be likely to induce further switching to Xbox by users who want to continue playing with their friends, either Call of Duty or another title. Yep, that's true. Who cares? That's competition, baby. Man up, figure out a better strategy. That video ended up being way longer, so I actually broke this to a part 4. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you like my content, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. The final part will be coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching this far and sticking with me. If you want to become a member, memberships are turned on, and you can watch the full thing immediately once you become a member. You do so by clicking the join button right down there. Thank you to all these fine people for supporting the channel. I'm going to get out of here. If you want to see the previous part, do so here, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.